So one of the things you will constantly hear from the Brexiteers is that somehow Britain and its empire are going to be miraculously restarted and we are going to become this amazing trade nation. However, that is not the case, because as we talked about last week, with our problems with Bombardier and the potential job losses that will result from in Northern Ireland, well, the US and, shall we say, other countries have all but added to this. So, Washington's slapdown of Britain is the second big trade reality check for May in less than a fortnight. Only last week, the UK's increasingly fragile position in trade disputes was exposed by the country's inability to prevent new ultra-high tariffs from the US that could hit thousands of jobs in a plane factory in Northern Ireland. In a fast-developing trade spat, Washington has teamed up with Brazil, Argentina, Canada, New Zealand, supposedly someone who wants to do a trade deal with us, Uruguay and Thailand to reject Britain's new proposed import arrangements for crucial agricultural goods such as meat, sugar and grains after Brexit. The fact that the UK's opponents include the US, Canada and New Zealand is a significant setback, because Britain is trying to style its former colonies as natural, strategic and commercial allies after it has quit the EU. Since August, Britain and the EU have repeatedly insisted that they would have reached an agreement on the terms which Britain would buy in food from around the world after Brexit. Brussels certainly negotiates all these quotas and tariffs on behalf of Britain and 27 other EU nations jointly. But London will need to take independent control of these policies from March 2019. That creates a dilemma over how to divide up the EU's current quota arrangements with other countries, agreed by the World Trade Organization. Between the UK and the remaining 27, these tariff rate quotas allowed countries outside the EU to export certain goods into the bloc with reduced duties, but only up to a maximum limit. The argument from Britain and the EU is that the rest of the world will be worse off after Brexit. The key legal defence in trade disputes: if the EU's quotas are simply reduced and Britain takes a share of them. British Trade Minister Liam Fox told Politico in an interview that Britain had agreed to take a portion of the EU's quotas based on the UK's average consumption over the last 3 years. America and the other 6 big food exporters, however, wrote an unusually sharply worded letter of complaint dated September 26th to the UK and to the EU representatives at the World Trade Organization over the terms of such an arrangement. "We cannot accept such an arrangement," reads the letter, seen by Politico. The 7 countries dispute the legal defence that the proposed post-Brexit agreement would leave them no worse off. The countries were particularly aggrieved by the fact that they had not been consulted and stressed no calculation of Britain's tariff rate quotas had been agreed to by the WTO without our agreement. Indeed, the countries suggest Britain and the EU needed to rework the whole system of import tariffs, and they could not just shuffle quotas between each other without disputing the delicate balance of commissions and entitlements that is fundamental to the global trade architecture today. The modification of these tariff rate quotas accesses agreements cannot credibly be achieved through technical ratification. None of these agreements should be modified without our agreement. The big food exporters argue that 2 fixed quotas, a UK quota and a EU 27 quota, makes markets less easy to sell to than one big quota. The logic is, if the EU quota, say for lamb, is 100,000 tonnes, and the exporters say that they lose out if that is divided into 30,000 tonnes for the UK and to 70,000 tonnes for the EU. If British lamb consumption plunges and the quota is unfulfilled, the exporter cannot necessarily compensate by selling more meat to France or other EU markets. The original 1,000 lamb ton quota allowed the exporter more flexibility where it could sell in markets on a case-by-case basis. We don't know what exact economic consequences of Brexit, said a Brazilian trade diplomat to the WTO, alluding to a potential economic deadline in the UK, post-Brexit, as well as new trade deals that could alter the appetite for New Zealand's lamb's export. If we split the quotas, we risk leaving markets available for our exporters. A spokesman for Britain's trade department proposed to coordinate with the complaints. The UK wants to ensure a smooth transition which minimises disruption to our trading relationships with other WTO members and tariff rate quotas. These are important issues and we are discussing them with the EU and WTO members. The exporters are likely to seek redress. The exporters are likely to seek to redress the balance by pushing for bigger export quotas, something that will trigger concern among both Britain and EU farmers because it would likely mean potentially more exported goods coming onto the market with their own product. New Zealand's Deputy Trade Secretary, I have no idea how you say this, Vangelis Valtilis, took to Twitter to protest that Britain and the EU were effectively delivering a fait accompli to the WTO. Sorry that key partners assume a deal they strike between them will suit the rest of the world, he wrote. He also warned that bigger players than New Zealand, itself a massive dairy, fruit and lamb powerhouse, will exert pressure on the WTO. Don't imagine it is just little old New Zealand with concerns. As if to drive home that point, a spokesperson for the US trade representatives said ensuring that the US exporters of food and agricultural products have the market access in Europe due to them even after Brexit is a high priority for the administration. So there you go. Just showing that, well, one country by itself is pretty weak compared to a collection of 27, united countries. This case was true before the election, and it's being shown even more true the more we come closer to Brexit. So don't just assume that everything is going to be all hunky-dory and tickety-boo, because, as you've seen here, it is not. And remember, Donald Trump said, oh yeah, we're going to put Britain ahead of the queue when they leave the EU. From this, the article we've just read, and from the stuff going on with Bombardier at the moment, it certainly doesn't look like we are being put ahead of the queue. So just another point where reality is dashing the hopes and dreams of the Brexiteers.